My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and you are listening to 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple and strategic choices that all of us can make in order to be fully alive. Today in the studio, I have with me, for the first time ever, Alfonso Mack, who's going to talk about these 3 words, blessings in disguise. So often we go through those things in our life that feel like curses, that feel like crises, that actually feel like they're sending us backwards. Alfonso today, in personal narrative form, shares parts of his story, parts of his life that he thought were dead ends that became pathways to a brighter future. Check out this conversation. Alfonso Mack here in the 3 Words podcast studio for the very first time. You know, we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the last couple of years, but before we kick into our conversation today, would you just take a minute and introduce yourself for the very first time to our listeners and viewers of 3 Words podcast?
Yeah, so I'm Alfonso Mack. I'm actually a campus minister with H2O Church. I'm a husband to my amazing wife, Catherine. We've been married since 2018. I actually have a 9-month-old baby boy, Isaiah. I'm a father to him. He's been great, and I love him. And I also am a chaplain with the football team, which is how we got to know each other even a little bit more over the last couple of years.
Well, yeah. So I do a lot of life coaching and sports psychology with our Bowling Green State University football team, as well as other teams. And you and I have spent some good time on the sidelines.
Great time on the sidelines.
On the sidelines, trying to encourage the guys, hanging out and say, you got this, you got this. Which in many ways, quite honestly, probably ties into our conversation today. We can maybe talk a little bit more about our work with sports. But let's kick into our conversation. Share with our viewers, share with our listeners the 3 words for today's conversation.
Blessing in disguise.
Blessing in disguise. Yeah, because that's an important conversation, because a lot of times, I'm guessing, the things that we feel like are curses in our life, or unfortunate circumstances in our life, or difficult situations in our life, they actually end up being blessings. Why is this conversation so important to you? You chose the 3 words. So why did you come on this podcast to talk about these things?
Well, I think one of the first things when I started to think about this podcast in 3 words, I'm like, there's a lot of 3 words that you can choose from. And as I was just kind of going through a list of them, this one stood out to me because there's been many moments in my life where I've gone through really tough situations. And in those tough situations, I've kind of had to wonder, like, are these actually helping my life, or are they not? And usually you don't see it in the middle, because normally they're hard and they're frustrating situations. But then you can look months to years later and you're like, oh, that was why this event happened in my life. And so there have been many things that I've gone through throughout my time being on this earth. And I'm only 28 years old, so I haven't been around that long.
And you're already a father and a husband,
I'm already
right?
a father and a husband. And there's been things I've gone through that have actually turned out to be blessings more so than I thought they would have been as I've looked at them.
Well, it's interesting, Alfonso, because obviously we were just joking about the fact that we're on the sidelines, and that's a pretty lively place, the sidelines of a football team. And during a game, and let's just be real. When we just watched together this last week was probably one of the most frustrating, challenging, some would say unfortunate football games that we've ever seen or been a part of. Now, you played football. We'll talk more about that. But for me, even as a life coach and as someone who does some sports psychology and some mental coaching, I was like, oh my goodness, this is tough. Now, I would presume, though, that 3 months or 3 years from now, we'll look back on this past Saturday and think there were probably lots of blessings in disguise, which is really hard when you're in the midst of the darkness, when you're in the midst of defeat, when you're in the midst of, well, let's just call it what it is, losing. Losing never feels like a blessing in disguise. So you and I are obviously mentoring young men and are spending time with them, helping them actually reframe a loss and reframe some of the difficulties they're going through in their personal life as well as on the field. But it seems like this conversation is even more personal to you than that. So my guess is there's things in your life as you have grown up in these last 28 years that have really convinced you that the things that we don't think are blessings are. but they're often in disguise. Maybe share some examples from your own life.
Yeah. The first example I think of is, and so if my mom is watching this, she'll get a kick out of this. But
we'll make sure she gets a link.
Make sure she gets a link to it. So going into high school, so from 8th grade going into my freshman year, so I lived on the west side of South Bend, Indiana, because that's where I'm from, home of the Fighting Irish for the people that don't know. And so I was thinking about going to a high school across the way because all of my friends that I played sports with growing up were going there. Everyone wanted to go and play football together. And my mom, as I was like, hey, Mom, I want to go over to this school. She's like, no, baby, we live down the street from the school. That's where you're going, Washington High School. And when I talk about down the street, you could look at my street, from my street, you could see my high school. Okay, so she was like, no, that's where you're going. And I remember being real upset, real angry. I was real hurt because I couldn't be with my friends that I grew up with. Like we were in like 4th, 5th grade, all the way up through middle school together. And I'm like, man, I can't be with them. And the reason I wanted to be with them is literally to play football. Now, what was crazy, that thing that happened, my first year of high school goes by. And it's like, I'm still upset. We weren't that good as a football team my first year. But then Washington. My second year goes by. And one of the kids whom his dad was trying to get me to come to that school to play freshman football because he was the coach, him and his brother transfers to my high school. Interesting, huh? And so then the next 3 years, I'm playing with these guys, a couple of these guys that I wanted to go play ball with across the way. And my mom, I remember her saying, now, what would have happened if you'd have went there? You'd have been stuck and left by yourself. And even though they were planning a transfer. And so you see, there's that thing is like, this ended up being a blessing more so than it was.
Well, I'm guessing a blessing that went even beyond your high school year because obviously you came here at Bowling Green State University as a student athlete on the football team. Do you think that opportunity would even happen had you moved over to that new school?
No, not at all. Honestly, I don't think so. I think that if that happens, I don't take football as serious because the coaching staff that I actually had in high school was amazing. I'm pretty sure 4 or 5 coaches on my staff that played football at University of Notre Dame. A couple of them played in the NFL. My wide receivers coach, our head coach, our defensive backs coach, and our running backs coach. All played top level football at Notre Dame. And so I got really amazing coaching, got really great experiences at my high school. And that teammate of mine that transferred back in, he was actually All-American. And so him and one other guy was an All-American. What that means is they brought in a little bit more scouts and stuff like that. And so when they got down to like my senior year,
they saw you.
Yeah, they saw me. And it's funny, we keep talking about this blessing in disguise thing because I remember, and this is just all the stories that I'm thinking about. I remember during that time, I'm transitioning, trying to get a scholarship, and I actually didn't get any scholarships coming out of high school. I had one Division II scholarship to a very small school in Rensselaer, Indiana, called St. Joseph's. And I remember I went to go visit. I'm looking at the school. I'm like, I don't really like it here. The coaching staff was amazing. Great dudes, really, really down to earth. And I remember at the time, one of my other teammates, one of my best friends, his name is Terrence Bush, was coming to BG as a preferred walk-on. I remember saying to my high school coach, hey, do you think I could go play at BG? Would you want to send in my film? And I remember you talking about blessing in disguise, things that seem very hard. My coach says to me, I remember clear as day, he's like, yeah, I think you could maybe play Division I football. I don't know. I don't really think that you're big enough or strong enough to be able to do it.
Whoa.
That's what he tells me. He's like, but I'll send your film anyway. And so he sends my film. I think it was a day or two later, BG calls me, hey, we have a preferred walk-on spot for you if you want to take it. And so I decided, I didn't even come visit. I was like, yep, I'm coming to Bowling Green. And I remember thinking about my time throughout college as I've went through a whole lot of hard things playing football, where all those words that I heard from my coach that were hard actually ended up being a huge blessing, I think, from God himself, because what it did was it gave me this value of wanting to actually work hard, because I wasn't the biggest guy and I wasn't the fastest guy and I wasn't the strongest guy. And so,
but you gave effort and enthusiasm.
I gave everything that I had. And I honestly, towards the end of my career, the things that my coach said that I wasn't, I actually ended up becoming towards the end of my time at BG.
For just a moment, I'm going to step out of my conversation with Alfonso as we're talking about blessings in disguise to invite you to share this episode with a friend or family member who might need to kind of reframe the difficulty and the crisis they're going through in their life. Now back to the conversation. So his words were a blessing in disguise. The fact that you transferred, the fact that you stayed at this school was a blessing in disguise. I mean, all of these pieces fell together. And let's pull back the lens even farther. Had you not stayed at that school, as your mom told you were doing, and you were mad and frustrated, you wouldn't have come to Bowling Green.
Nope, wouldn't have been in Bowling
You
Green.
wouldn't have met your wife.
Wouldn't have met my wife.
You wouldn't have a child.
Nope.
We wouldn't be sitting here in Three Words Podcast studio right now.
Not at all.
I mean, all of those things. I mean, you can, and my guess is for years to come, you'll be able to look back to that situation that felt like was wrong, was unfair, was unjust, and was a bad decision. It was a blessing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know you have other examples, blessings in disguise. Tell me more about Alfonso Mack.
Yeah. Even as you were talking about, even like meeting my wife, so and everything that happened. So even there's a couple of other things that I think about in my life, and a major one that's actually how I'm even doing what I'm doing today. And so my dream growing up, playing NFL, biggest dream that I ever could have had.
Sure.
And when I got to my junior season, my redshirt junior season, I ended up, and that was after a long list of injuries that I had. And those injuries, I was thinking about quitting in the middle of that season. And I'm going to get to the NFL part later, but I got to kind of build up to get there. And so prior to, I was going through a really tough season. I had just actually become a Christian at this point in my life, and I remember being angry with God. And the reason why is because my first year at BG as a redshirt freshman, I was traveling and stuff to games. As a redshirt sophomore, I wasn't. And then going into my redshirt sophomore in training camp, I sprained my Achilles and my ankle, and I was out for like a month and a half, 2 months. And I remember going through this season, and as I got healthy, I came back, and our coaches brought in 2 freshman corners at my position, and they're playing and they're starting, and they're doing amazing. And I remember just thinking to myself, being real angry of like, I'm doing all these things for God. Why in the world am I not getting the opportunities? And then as the season went on, I'm still not traveling. And I was very close to quitting. And you can ask any of my closest friends that knew me at that time. One of my closest friends, Nate Locke, we were locker mates right next to me every day. Every day I show up, dude, I'm done. I'm not coming back. Well, there ended up actually being this event for Fellowship of Christian Athletes called Fields of Faith. There's this thing where people come and share about Jesus and all this kind of stuff. And so I happened to be asked to go to this event, share a little bit of my faith. But the thing was, I ended up meeting a guy there, okay, who went through the same exact situation, but at a different school than me. He went to Youngstown State, and he played cornerback. Redshirt freshman year, he's traveling. Redshirt sophomore year, had some things that happened. He wasn't traveling at all. And he said, you know what I did? I went to my coach, and I said, hey, coach, like, why am I not traveling? All this stuff. I don't even remember what response this coach gave, but he said he remembered being so upset that he packed up his Monte Carlo right after that conversation, quit school, left, quit football. And I remember after we had this conversation, he said, I don't know why, but I feel like God's telling me to tell you to keep going. He's like, now, I'm not saying that this means that you'll end up becoming a starter someday, or you might be that guy that saves the day in a football game or something like that. Sure. But he's like, there's something to going through things and sticking through it that teaches you hard work and perseverance. And so I think that God could use this in your life. And I was like, all right. I decided to not quit. I stay on the team. I ended up getting on special teams before the year was over. And then the next season, my redshirt junior year, I ended up becoming a starter, and that was my best year as a redshirt junior.
Wow.
And so I went through all these things, all these trials, losing like where I was out on the depth chart, getting hurt, all these things, thinking about quitting. And then God ends up using him as a blessing. And so I look back and I say, man, if that doesn't happen, I don't know where I end up. But here's the thing, that story even keeps going more. And this is where it gets into how I'm doing what I'm doing today. So my redshirt junior year comes around, and I had a great year. So much that I didn't know this until later. If I would have left my junior year, I probably would have been a draft pick. Didn't know that until later. But I stayed my senior year. My senior year, I had a great first few games of the season. And then I ended up actually getting hurt and losing my starting spot as a senior.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so you can think of all the stuff that, and I'm talking about like guys catching passes on me. I give up a game-winning touchdown against Eastern Michigan, and things seem to be tanking, you know? And I had to come and realize, like, where's my identity at in all of this? And and what really matters. And I learned a lot throughout that season. But still, by the time the season was over, I didn't start the last 3 games and I was hurt. I still got an opportunity to work out with a few teams in the NFL, which is kind of very rare to happen for a guy coming from a small school in BG. I was able to work out with the Rams and the Steelers. And I remember going throughout that process, and you talk about blessings, guys. And as I'm working hard, I'm working super hard. I'm like, I want to give this everything that I got. And I remember I got cut from the Rams. The Pittsburgh, I had an experience where they didn't treat me that well. And I remember I started wrestling, well, what am I going to do in my life? And by this point, I had already decided I would go into ministry, maybe think about being a pastor or something. But I want to pursue my dream first. Like, that's what I want more than anything.
Which was the NFL.
Which is the NFL. And so I got there, and my agent at the time wanted me to try to go play in Canada. He wanted me to keep going. And I felt like in my heart, I was like, no, I think I'm going to be done. I'm going to give it up. So I gave up my dream of pursuing football to go pursue pastoral ministry as a campus minister with H2O Church. And I will tell you this, if none of these things happen, if my junior year I decide to leave, I don't meet my wife, because where I met her on a mission trip. That next spring, after my junior season was done, mission trip is where I meet her. If I decide to leave that year, guess what? I don't go to that mission trip because I'm probably training of some sort for maybe a combine or something like that. And so then I start to think about that. And then I'm like, okay, well, what would my life have looked like if I would have made it to NFL? I don't really know. But I know that what I'm doing now, I enjoy more than I ever could have imagined. And I went through all these things.
And not only you're enjoying it more, you're probably having a greater impact on the lives of people forever than if you would have played in the NFL. Because now you get to come alongside of, I mean, I'm guessing, how many years you've been doing this?
I've been working with H2O since 2018.
Yeah. So we're talking hundreds of people whose lives you've touched. And even now, you and I get to be on the sidelines and in locker rooms and spending time with players who are probably dealing with the exact same things you did. Asking why, why not me? How's this happening? Why is this happening? Obviously, one of those players we had on camera here at 3 Words Podcast, Jaden McKinstry, who is, I think believe in miracles was our 3 words because he's a cancer survivor. I mean, there's so much pain, challenge, perceived curses. And it's for those of us who've been, doing this for a while, we can look in and go, no, hang on. These are blessings. You just don't see it yet. One of the things that struck me as you were telling your stories was the fact so often just around the corner from our greatest pain is opportunity, but so often we quit too early. We just bail too quickly. And if we would just hold on a little longer, we'd be able to experience the blessing. But sometimes the disguise becomes so paralyzing that we just say, I can't do it anymore. And it sounds like for you, you just kept going around that corner. And then all of a sudden you're like, ooh, now I understand. Now I understand what's going on. Wow. What great illustrations. I mean, in many ways you've embodied, you're not just expressing this, Alfonso, here in our podcast. You aren't just speaking about it. You have lived it. This is a lived experience for you. I have to ask though, any regrets?
No, not at all. I look back at everything and I'm like, it ended up working out the way that it needed to. And I wouldn't take anything back. I enjoy the life that I live now. I love my family. My son and wife are absolutely amazing. I work with amazing people. Still getting to be around football has been great. And even all the hard stuff that I've gone through, as you mentioned, I have gotten to literally walk through the same stuff with people who were in my shoes. Like I can think of 3 or 4 athletes right now over the last 4 years since I've been, back in Bowling Green working at H2O Church, where I've literally walked through the same stuff with walk-ons. Guys who are like, dude, this is frustrating. Like, coaches are showing me any love. I'm not playing at all. It's like, what do I do? And it's like I get to walk through them about what it truly means to like persevere, what it means to continue to work hard and to glorify God in whatever it is that you're doing. And so it's been great. And so I wouldn't take any of it back.
Well, I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you didn't give up, because we wouldn't be sitting here today. We wouldn't be friends. Well, it reminds me, even as I kind of wrap up our conversation here, is oftentimes we think to find that calling in our life, go to the place of greatest strength. And it's there where you'll find your calling in life. And I've not found that true in my own life. And as I've spent time with so many different people, I've not seen that true in their lives as well. I think you go to the place of greatest crisis, challenge, difficulty, and it's there where you find your calling in life. Because in many ways, your calling flows out of the challenges that you have personally walked through. Your calling and the life that you live today, which is so amazing as you've described, and you love it and you have no regrets, came out of places of pain. And indeed, these were blessings. Absolutely. In disguise. Hey, it's great having you in the studio today. I predict you're going to be back here again. We're going to be having some more conversations as a part of 3 Words Podcast. I enjoy our friendship. I enjoy working side by side with you. And what I would say is one of the greatest callings that anyone can, and that's helping human beings frame the pain and the crisis and difficulties in their lives and continue to pursue hope and to continue to pursue things that matter. And it's great to do that alongside of you here in Bowling Green, Ohio. Alfonso, thanks for being in the studio today. Thanks for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
For life coaching, consulting services, or to hire a keynote speaker, please visit dmbcoaching.com.